Welcome, everyone. My name is Shirley, and I will be your moderator this evening. Tonight, we are joined by Phylip Curtis, who is going to talk to us about how to ensure your PPO fees are competitive for your area. We'd love for this to be an engaging conversation, so a few housekeeping things before we start. If you have any questions, we invite you to please enter them into the Q&A box below, the chat box below your screen, at the bottom of your screen, and please type it in there. We're going to address all questions at the end of the webinar. CE is not available for this webinar live or in demand, but we will be sending out the recording of tonight's presentation to everyone who registered. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Phylip. And thank you, Phylip, for being with us. We're so excited to hear what you have to say. I will pass it over to you now.
Awesome. Thanks, Shirley. Appreciate it. Just want to make sure that you can hear me okay. I'm using that fancy microphone. Just want to make sure that audio is coming right.
Very pro.
Awesome. And it looks like I'm about to start a podcast here, but I'm not quite to that point yet for you guys. But I'm so excited to go over this information with you guys today. And I appreciate the introduction, Shirley. Appreciate all those of you for joining us. I know we've got practices joining us all across the country. For some of you, it's the tail end of your workday. You've probably already finished out for the day. Maybe you've seen your last patient. Some of you, you're in kind of the last hour or two. So I appreciate you taking that precious time where you're exhausted and probably just a little bit annoyed after a long work day to deal and listen to this presentation today. So I'm excited to go over this information because if you're on the call today, odds are this is something you're interested in learning more about, which is one of the most common questions and concerns for dental practices and dentists, owners, office managers, you name it, nationwide, which is how do I ensure that my PPO insurance reimbursements for my practice are competitive for my area, right? And it's a very natural and normal question for people to ask. It's not much different than an employee asking, how do I know if I'm getting paid competitively? Not just within my company, but within the industry. And so what we're going to talk about today is how that you can ensure that for your practice and to make sure that you have competitive reimbursements for your area. And I'm really excited to go into these details with you guys today. So let's dive in. Again, like Shirley mentioned, my name is Phylip Curtis. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing for Unitas PPO Solutions. Here's my contact information. I'll give it to you again at the end of the presentation today, but feel free to take a screenshot of that. If you have any questions afterwards, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. Happy to answer any questions that you have. So just a quick intro into why we're talking about this. Unitas PPO Solutions has been helping dental practices to negotiate increased reimbursements since 2011. So that's why we've been asked to come and help educate practices on how to ensure and increase your own reimbursements and ensure that those are competitive. We've worked with thousands of practices in all 50 states. Right now, we actually represent over 1,900 locations. I need to update the slide. We're located in sunny Mesa, Arizona, where it's a nice 89 degrees today. And we have over 100 PPO insurance consultants on staff. This is all we do is help practices to negotiate and optimize and increase their reimbursement rates. So that's why we're talking about this information today. Now, what I'm going to go through today is the framework for how to ensure your PPO reimbursements are competitive, how to ultimately negotiate and increase reimbursement rates on your own. And so if you want to take notes today, by all means, go ahead and do that. If you want to have the framework and workbook for what we're going to go through today, you can go download that right now at ppoguide.com. That's a free resource for you. Just put in your contact information. It will send you a PDF that you can print out right now and take notes on if you want to. Or if you're the office manager or the dentist, and halfway through this presentation, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I haven't taken enough notes, or I want Janet or Dr. Smith or whoever to see this afterwards and they weren't able to join today, or you want to be able to actually implement the things that we're talking about instead of just sitting on the webinar and listening to me babble at you for an hour. So if you want to implement these steps, this workbook is a free resource that we've created for you. So feel free to scan that QR code or go to ppoguide.com and you can go download that resource right now. And if you missed it, I'll plug it a couple more times throughout the presentation. But let's dive in. And so just kind of going back to the topic that we started with, which is the number one question that dental practices have across the country, which is how do I know if I'm being paid competitively by the PPOs that I'm interacting with and credentialed with? And it's a very common question. Like I said, it's a common desire for most people to want to know that they are being paid competitively and fairly for their industry. It's a very common question for dentists as well. So in my environment, if I was an employee wanting to know if I'm paid competitively, there's websites out there that let you know those things. Or if I want to know what I should sell my house for, there's websites out there that tell you what your people down the street have sold their house for. But within the PPO environment, there's not a centralized site, and legally there can't be for multiple reasons, to say what is a fair rate of reimbursement or what is a normal rate of reimbursement, or what is an average rate of reimbursement down to the PPO or down to even just the procedure code. And so it begs the question, most doctors start to ask, how do I know if I'm being paid fairly and competitively? And also, regardless of that number, I also want those to go up. So even if it's average, I want to be above average, or even if it's average for my area, I want it to increase, because ultimately every doctor has the same problems that every business owner has, which is costs will continue to increase in any business. So the ability to maintain that margin needs to increase as well. And in most typical business environments, when costs increase, you increase your prices. The problem with typically, or that you come into when it comes to dentistry or medical, is that the prices that you charge for your procedures typically aren't what you make for your procedures. More often than not, what you get paid by insurance is really where that top line starts. And then the bottom line is really where your expenses are. And so ultimately, you having that question and that desire to see how can I get those to raise is a pretty normal request for a practice, especially in an environment where things are continuing to be more expensive, whether that's wages, whether that's rent, whatever your expenses are, things are going to go up, especially in our environment and economy today, which is probably why you're on the call today. There's been recent studies done by the ADA and other professionals that have polled dentists to see what percentage of them have had an increase to their PPO reimbursements in the last 12 months. And it's a staggering amount. Over 80% of dentists polled through the ADA haven't seen any increase to their PPO reimbursement rates in the last 12 months, which to them, or to us, it sounds kind of shocking because of how much expenses have increased. And so that's normally why this is such a hot topic for people to talk about, is if my costs are going to increase regularly, shouldn't my reimbursement rates increase as well? And this is the framework that we're going to talk to you about today, is how to increase those reimbursement rates, and also how to ensure that you know that those are competitive for your area. So within that falls three main frameworks that we're going to dive into today. The first one is, in order to have competitive and high reimbursement rates, I have to understand as a dental practice the relationship I have with those insurance companies and how it works so I can improve it. Number two, I need to understand how to negotiate, what my tactics can be, and what type of strategies I can employ to increase my reimbursement rates. And the third thing I need to understand is what other strategies exist out there to help me maximize my negotiation and my increase opportunities even more. So that's what we'll talk about today. Hopefully that sounds interesting to you. And we're going to go through all this information today. And like I said, I'll plug a couple more times throughout the presentation that QR code. So if we get halfway through this and you think, oh, I kind of want to know what we just talked about, or I want Janet or Dr. Smith to know what was talked about, you can print out that guide as a free resource for you. Okay. All right. So we're going to dive in to key number one. I apologize. I'm just getting over a cold. So I'm going to be taking a lot of water today. Number one, the key is we want to understand our PPO participation and our current reimbursements. So there's three things. You're going to find there's a lot of threes here. First, we need to discover and map out what our existing PPO participation is per doctor at each location that we have. The second thing we need to do, and I'm saying we as the industry, right? You at your dental practice, what you're learning today is how to do this for yourselves. How do I know and map out the participation of each of my doctors? And then how do I receive and document my actual fee schedule reimbursements? And what are those? And the last thing is, how do I compare and repair any UCR and PPO reimbursement discrepancies? We'll talk about those three things, okay? And all this is preparatory to increasing your fee schedules. So this isn't just kind of like a shotgun of different types of strategies. This is all preparatory and foundational to, if I want to increase my reimbursement rates as a dental practice, this is the framework that I have to follow. This is what Unitas, we've implemented for thousands of practices over 10 years. We know what the framework needs to be. If you want to implement it on your own in your practice, this is the framework that you would follow as well, okay? So let's dive into the first one. How do we discover and map out our PPO participation? First thing, we need to understand what the different types are. What are the different relationships that I can have with an insurance company, and why do they matter, and how are they different? And what are the unique pros and cons with those relationships? And then the second is, how do I figure out what those relationships are? Okay. So before I dive into what those relationships are, let's just talk about the easy thing, which is how do we figure out what relationship we have? There's really three, and it's oftentimes misconstrued as just an on and off switch. Most practices think that I'm either in network with insurance or I'm out of network with insurance. They think of it as on and off switch, and they think of it for the whole practice. When in reality, participating with insurance or the contractual relationship that you have with insurance is down to the doctor at that location. So if you have three doctors, just because all of them have been in network with that insurance, it doesn't mean that they're in network the same way. One could be under this direct contract relationship that we'll dive into. One could be leased from this insurance through a different insurance company, and this one's under an umbrella network. And maybe there's a fourth one, and either he or she is totally out of network, right? So in and out of network is real. It is a real thing, and that is accurate. The problem, though, is when you're in network, there's actually a layer deeper, and that's what we're talking about today. If I'm in network, am I direct? Am I being leased? Or am I under an umbrella company? And the key that we want to remember is that doesn't follow the location or the tax ID. That follows the doctor. And especially it follows the doctor, even if they're at multiple locations. So we'll dive into that as well, okay? But knowing that matters, and that's the level of information we need if we're trying to ensure our rates are competitive and then increase those through negotiations. This is why we're going to go into this level of detail, because surface level, ignoring this and just thinking about it in terms of in-network and out-of-network, you're going to either miss the mark and not negotiate properly. You're going to talk to the wrong person. You're not going to make any change whatsoever. Or worst case scenario, you could make your reimbursement rates go down if you're not paying attention at this level. So that's why this isn't me just digging into the nitty gritty and being a nerd of PPOs. This is really, I have to understand this level of granularity if I want the reimbursement rates to go up. So that's just the fact of the matter. So the best analogy I have here is when you're figuring out how each of your doctors participate, that is the equivalent of taking the x-ray on the patient. The patient can come in and point to the tooth and you can see that it's cracked, but what is actually happening with that tooth? Has it gone down to the root or not? Are multiple teeth cracked? I don't know that until I've done an x-ray. So again, you can get some of this information anecdotally by just saying, I think I'm direct, or I think I'm through a leasing arrangement, but you don't know the truth, and you don't know that, just like an x-ray, until you actually perform the activity that you need to do to get all the truth, which is, in reality, more often than not, calling the insurance company, calling provider relations to confirm per doctor, per location, how they're participating with you. So again, there's a contact list of provider relations phone numbers that I'll talk to you about at the end of the webinar that you can get your hands on. You're going to need to use a spreadsheet to collect that information so you can keep it organized, because it's by doctor, by location. And then you need to ask the right question to the right person. You need to ask, how is my doctor participating with you? So if there's Dr. Smith, Dr. John, and Dr. Bob, right? I'm asking one question per doctor. How is Dr. Smith participating with you at our location in Phoenix? Okay. Is he directly contracted? Is he through a leasing arrangement? And if so, which PPO is he being leased through? Or is he under an umbrella? Which umbrella is he leased through, right? That's the level of granularity we're talking about. The participation type, the effective date, meaning as of this date, this is when he or she is then fallen in network. And then the third thing is, what is the fee schedule that's attached to that? And again, just to make sure that we're not making assumptions, when we're talking about a fee schedule, we mean the document from the insurance company that lists out all the CDT codes and what that PPO will reimburse you if you perform that CDT code on an in-network patient, right? So it's a lot of information, but it has to be gathered. So again, if there's 3 doctors, I'm asking the question 3 times because it's potentially different answers for each doctor. This doctor, like I said, might be direct and have a different fee schedule than Dr. Smith or Dr. Bob or Dr. John, right? So we're getting that information for each and every doctor. And again, this might seem super granular, or the danger that you might take is to say, I know how my doctors participate. I know that they're in network and I know that they're under a direct contract. Unless you've called and gotten that either in writing or over the phone, I'd say doubt your doubts before you doubt what you think you know, because either A, you do know the answer because you have figured this out, but it's changed, or B, you think you know because you've seen claims, but you haven't verified this level of information. And the reason why I say that with such confidence is we've been doing this for a decade, and it's just too often that a practice feels like they know exactly how their doctors participate, and with 1 or 2 or 5 different PPOs, it's actually wrong. It's different than what they thought it was, which again, it's no fault of their own, but it can change. And so that's why they're out of the loop. And unless they're auditing every single EOB and matching every EOB to every fee schedule they've ever been promised, how would they possibly know? How would anybody possibly know? So this level of granular information matters so much, just like it matters to do an x-ray on a patient. If a patient comes in and they crack the tooth all the way down the root, your treatment is going to be different than if there's just a surface level chip, right? Ultimately, the problem is going to determine the treatment. It's the same thing with PPOs. And I know I'm not a dentist, and I'm probably using these analogies and I sound kind of like a dork, but my emphasis that I'm trying to make is, if you're going to make a foray into trying to increase your reimbursement rates, you have to understand how you participate. Otherwise, it's like having a patient come in the chair, pointing at the tooth, and you prescribing treatment without doing an exam or an x-ray, which I know nobody would ever do, but that's the same level of danger, right, in this scenario, or negligence that you're taking if you fail to figure out how you participate before negotiating, because the problems can be arguably just as big, which is if I don't know how I participate and I try to negotiate, I could make my contract worse. I could drop myself down to a worse reimbursement. I could fall out of network unintentionally, or I just spent best case scenario, I wasted a bunch of time and made no change. So that's kind of the spectrum we're talking about here. So hopefully I haven't beaten that dead horse too much, but let's talk about these different types of participation, because I find that this is the most valuable stuff that I've ever been able to share with anybody. And this is what everybody continues to come back for to learn more about, which is PPO relationships are complicated. It can be frustrating, but I found that most frustration is just a root of not understanding what currently is happening, not because innately everything's going to be frustrating with insurance. It's just not understanding how the relationships work. So participation type number one is a direct contract. The way I describe this, you're going to think to yourself, that's how insurance works. This makes sense. But it's just only one type of participation, which is why it matters. So a direct contract is where you, the dentist, have credentialed with an insurance company. You filled out the paperwork. You've agreed to become an in-network doctor, which means essentially this insurance company right here says, hey, here's a fee schedule. Here's what we'll pay you for all these procedures if you treat one of our patients and you send the claim to us, right? For this procedure, we'll pay you $85. For this procedure, we'll pay you $105. And again, sometimes it's we'll pay you this much, or it's we'll pay you this much and the patient has to pay a portion. So it just depends on the insurance company. But ultimately, you're agreeing to being paid a certain amount to treat those patients in network. So those patients come to your door, you treat them, you send the claim to that insurance company, they pay the claim, comes back to you in the mail or electronically, it's paid in network, and the reimbursement rate that you get is according to the contractual fee schedule that you agreed to, right? What I've just described, again, if you're following along, you're basically thinking to yourself, that sounds like insurance, which you're right. That's the normal and most common way to participate with insurance. There's a different way that comes up more often that practices either don't realize or just aren't intending for this to happen, which is two PPOs leasing from each other, leasing a doctor. So how this works is this orange insurance company, let's say this doctor credentialed with them, they wanted to join this insurance, they've been treating those patients, and they're happily getting paid back from that insurance company. A second insurance company can come along that doctor, maybe they intentionally never wanted to go in network with, or maybe they just never went in network with unintentionally. Either way, this insurance company can come along and say, we want this doctor or these doctors in this zip code to be in network. And the reason why we want that is because we want to not either have to pay out of network benefits, or we want our patients to be happy. We want them to get a discount for the services. That's why they pay us premiums, right? So they need doctors in network. So what they can do is they can come to this insurance company and say, we'd like to lease this doctor from you. They've already created a relationship with you. We want to borrow that. So in that scenario, green insurance company comes to orange insurance company, signs a document, signs a contract with each other. Maybe green insurance company pays a fee to orange insurance company. But now, with the sign of a pen, this doctor is now in network with green insurance company through the orange insurance company. So what does that mean? Green insurance patients start popping up at the practice because they do this for every insurance. Janet in the front office sends a claim into the green insurance company. Maybe she's expecting that claim to come back out of network, but now all of a sudden it's in network. And how is it in network? Because this green insurance company has piggybacked onto this direct contract. So again, the claim still comes back from this insurance company. It's paid in network, and the reimbursement rate that they're paying is the exact rate of reimbursement that's on the fee schedule of the other company that the doctor already agreed to credential with. That makes sense to everybody? Again, there's a chat feature down below. We're going to have a chance for Q&A, but I want to make sure that leasing makes sense, which is if I join an insurance and I agree to be reimbursed a certain amount for certain patients, another insurance company can come along and borrow that contract such that I see those patients and they're paid according to this insurance company's fee schedule. Now, you probably have one of two reactions. You're either thinking, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I already knew about that. Or you're thinking, wait a second, I know this existed. How is this legal? Why would I want this to happen to me? So that's usually what happens when I start to describe it. So for those of you that are thinking, hold on, I didn't know that this was a thing. Why is it? How is that possible? Is that legal? Why would I want that to happen? How do I get out of this? That's not my intention at all, because in reality, this is just a way for you to be in network with insurance. So if you want to be in network with insurance, this relationship they just created might be the highest paying fee schedule. So that might be a great fee schedule offer, and it might be better than if you were to just directly contract with that insurance company. Also, the answer to how is this legal, the quick answer, because again, I'm not an attorney, is that when you join insurance, so when you credentialed with the orange insurance company, there's a term in that contract that allows them to lease you out to any insurance company that they want. So in that scenario, they have the power to do it. You've signed a contract that's let them to do it. And in reality, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a way for you to be a network with insurance. So then that begs the question, what can I do about it? And the answer is, well, again, what we'll talk about later on is there's a way to negotiate or optimize and improve this arrangement here to make sure that it still works in your favor. Not necessarily a bad thing. I'm agnostic as to these types, as to which one's good and which one's bad. They're just a way for you to be a network with insurance. So that's what we'll talk about today is if this is the relationship you have with one of your carriers or two of your carriers, there's a way to increase it through negotiating and optimizing. That's what we'll talk about today. Okay. Last one, and then we'll move on to the nitty gritty, which is umbrella networks. So some of you are probably familiar with this. An umbrella network company is typically not what would be considered an insurance company. They're not the same thing. They don't typically have card-carrying patients. They don't insure. They don't take premiums from anybody. Really, all they are is they're either what's considered a repricer of claims, or they're just a third-party administrator. So in this scenario, companies like Connection Dental or Dentamax, or sometimes Carrington or Zealous and other companies operate like an umbrella network, where in reality, what happens is you credential with an umbrella, you agree to that umbrella's fee schedule, rates of reimbursement. That umbrella then has a network of PPOs underneath them that if you've joined this umbrella like Dentamax turns around and distributes your information out to these PPOs under their network. And so now those PPOs may elect to pick you up in network through that Dentamax contract or whatever umbrella network you credentialed with. So again, not necessarily a bad or a good way to participate with insurance. It's just a way to participate with insurance. So ultimately, the key to understand here is if you find that you get lots of EOBs back, where on a pro fee, you're always paid for some reason across multiple insurance companies, the same amount of money, odds are it's because you're being picked up through a single umbrella company. Because what that means is 3 or 4 or 5 insurances are all paying you on the exact same contracted fee schedule. They're all borrowing Dentamax's fee schedule or Carrington or Connection or Zealous. So does that make sense to everybody? So ultimately, again, not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a way to be in network with insurance. So if this is the type of relationship you have, so let's say this is your practice, well, let's keep it easy and say it's just one doctor. If this was Cigna, MetLife, and United Concordia, and this umbrella network was Dentamax, and again, I'm just using random names. Doesn't mean that these work together. But then that would mean that for those 3 patient bases, you're likely going to be paid according to that Dentamax fee schedule. So ultimately, it's just a way to participate. So at the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make, and I've taken a long time on this, so hopefully I haven't bored you, but understanding how you participate per doctor, per location, will tell you what needs to be done and what options you have in order to negotiate and optimize. So much so that that's the best comparison that I can make is to say, when you take an x-ray on a patient and do an exam, you know what the problems are and you know what treatment to prescribe. Same thing here. When you've done this level of digging to figure out how do I participate with every insurance company per doctor, per location. So again, if I have Dr. Smith and Dr. Johnson at a location in Phoenix, it's very possible that the web of participation of how Dr. John is participating it could be different than Dr. Smith. It happens all the time. They could be brothers, right? They could be associates and owners. They could have credentialed the same day. They could have, again, work at the same location under the same tax ID number, submitted credentialing applications on the same day. It's still possible that 2 doctors or more have different participation relationships, either because it's changed over time or it started different in either scenario. So the key I'm trying to make is if you want to increase your fee schedules and you want to make sure they're competitive, you have to understand the relationships that you have with each insurance company per doctor, because that's going to tell you what fee schedule you're being paid on and what rate you're starting at now, right? It's almost like if you wanted to negotiate your salary and you didn't know what your salary was right now, you just kind of knew, it's going to make it difficult to negotiate salary. Same thing here. And I know it's kind of a silly example, but same thing with insurance. Okay, that's point number 1. Let's keep going. After you've collected this information, again, a lot of times the most effective way to do it is to call or to email a representative at Provider Relations. Sometimes you can check your portal to get this information, or like I said, you can email them to get a current fee schedule and your participation per doctor, per location. Once you have that, make sure you update your practice management software with those current fee schedules. And then the first thing you want to do to set yourself up for success is make sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot prior to negotiating. What I mean by that is not a common mistake, but one of the worst mistakes you can make in dentistry is I have a UCR, which is my usual and customary reimbursement. That's my sticker price for dentistry, right? That's my fee. That's my fee schedule, right? There's a lot of terms out there, but that's what a dentist charges for their procedures. And then there's the reimbursement rates. So again, some PPOs might pay this much, some pay this much, some pay this much. So you charge $100 for a procedure. This PPO pays 60, this one pays 70, this one pays 50, this one pays 90. But your UCRs for sure should always be above your PPO reimbursements. And the reason why that matters is an insurance company by default, because that's the value proposition of insurance, are going to take a discount off of your UCR. And the reason why they're going to do that is for a number of reasons. Number one, they know that they should never pay 100% of UCR. And number two, they need to show to the patient that there's a discount, right? That's the purpose of insurance. And so if there's ever a scenario where you have a UCR that's at or below what a PPO is willing to reimburse you, you will likely never get your maximum reimbursement because they're going to just set the floor down again. So if you have a UCR that's $100 and this PPO is willing to reimburse $125, you generally will never get $125 or $100. You're probably going to get like $60 or $70 or $80 because that's how they set their fee schedules, is a percentage of or a discount off of the average UCR for an area until you negotiate. So to compare and repair those discrepancies, take a look at your most popular procedures, plug them into a spreadsheet, UCRs, all the reimbursement rates that you know that you're getting for those PPOs, and then look horizontally by code and say, are any of these lower than any of my fee schedules? And if so, I need to raise my UCR because for a number of reasons, if I submit a UCR that's below my fee schedule, I'll never get the maximum reimbursement. So in addition to that, there's an available percentile-based analysis tool. So we do this a lot. Henry Schein has a tool for this where you can say, it's nice to know that my UCRs are above my reimbursement rates, but how do my UCRs, so my sticker prices, how do those compare against doctors in my area? So again, those are not PPO reimbursements. Those are just my UCRs. So you can get an analysis done to say, where do I fall on a percentile for my UCR fees? So if you're looking at that to ensure you're competitive against your peers and making sure that you're above your fee schedules, then you're setting yourself up for success when you go to the table to negotiate your reimbursement rates. Why? Because here's the kicker. High UCRs correlate to high reimbursements, obviously, and low UCRs correlate to low reimbursements because that's the ceiling. That's where everything starts. All right, I told you I'd do this again, but if some of you have just hopped on, I know this is a lot of information. I hope that it's helpful, and I hope you're taking notes, and I hope you're overwhelmed. And if that's the case, you need to download this guide because what this is it's a workbook of here are the steps we're going through today so you can implement this in your practice. If you're feeling overwhelmed, then that means I'm doing my job because this is a laborious process. But again, if you want to carry it out for your practice, we have the workbook that talks through it, okay? And it's free. Just go scan the QR code or go to the website right there. For those of you that are calling in, that website is PPOguide.com. Guide, like guide you down the trail. PPO, like PPO insurance. Okay? All right, that was just number one. And I'm winded, and you guys are probably already tired of listening to me, but we're keep going. So we're going to go into the nitty-gritty step, which is the PPO Negotiation Tactics. Number two. So PPO Negotiation Tactics, 3 things we need to think about here. If we're going to improve and increase our fee schedules, we've got to negotiate with insurance companies. How do we do that? There's 3 ways, 3 things to do. Number 1, don't waste time on the wrong procedures. Number 2, who do you approach, and what do you say? So let's approach the process correctly. And the third thing is, if they respond back with an offer, how do I compare that? How do I know if it's competitive for my area? How do I know if it's competitive for me? How do I evaluate that overall? Those are the things we'll talk about now. Okay? All right. Moving along. First things first. How do I make sure that I don't waste time negotiating or looking at the wrong procedures? Nobody wants to spend a bunch of time doing things that don't help, right? Ultimately, when it comes to negotiating with an insurance company, there are codes that probably will not ultimately matter for you more often than not. And so in order to make sure that you're focusing on the CDT codes that matter the most for your practice, this is what I would suggest you do. And again, this is the framework that we do, and this is what we would do for clients. First things first, you would export an annual production summary from your practice management software, which basically says over the last 12 months, which procedures did the practice do, into 3 columns. Which procedures, how many times were those procedures performed, and what was the total production generated from those procedures. And then what you do is you take that 3rd column and you sort it descending to ascending, and that will show you your 35 highest grossing revenue producing procedures. Those 35, and I know 35 is a weird number, but what we found is that that's kind of the magic number of both the amount of procedures that a PPO will generally help you focus on, and 35 typically amounts to like 95% or more of all the production you do is in and around 30 to kind of 40 procedure codes. We all know there's 600, 700, 800 CDT codes out there, but there's typically only about 30 to 40 that you do day in and day out, or month in, month out, okay? So once you know what those procedure codes are, when you're negotiating with an insurance company, those are the ones that you'll be focusing on. Doesn't mean that you ignore the whole fee schedule. But again, if you do 2 dentures a year, you get a fantastic increase on your denture code, great. But what about your pro fees, and what about your crowns, and what about the things that you do regularly? So this applies, even more if you're a specialist, but it still applies if you're a GP, because ultimately every practice is a little bit different. And we want to make sure we're looking at the codes that actually move the needle, okay? That's first thing. Second thing is, okay, who do we talk to? What do we say? And how do we get this to actually work in our favor? So if we're going to approach the process, if you're going to negotiate on your own, there's a couple of things to know. First thing is, most insurances will consider negotiating with you every 2 to 3 years. So a couple important words in that sentence is the word consider and the word 2 to 3 years. So consider means that it doesn't mean that they will negotiate, but they typically like to set that rule so that way people aren't just constantly asking and asking and asking. That's when they're willing to consider it. Just like an employer typically says, I'm willing to review your compensation every year or every 2 years. Same thing with insurance, okay? Doesn't mean you can't keep asking, but that's generally when you'll have the most success is at those intervals. And in 2 to 3 years, again, that varies by insurance company, but again, typically every 2 to 3 years is when most are willing to have a conversation, okay? Second thing is, who do I reach out to? So if you don't have any point of contact at an insurance company that you've worked with before, you would start with provider relations. So whoever you can get in contact with, and the phrasing that you could use is to say, I would like to request a fee schedule increase. We found that that's one of the most effective ways to phrase it. So that's how you can reach out, whether that's a phone call or an email. The third thing to keep in mind is you want to pay attention to all that stuff I just ranted about for 20 minutes, which is your participation. You have to pay attention to the participation you collected and any leasing arrangements. And you need to ask for increases on the fee schedules that you're actually being paid on. So what does that mean? So let's say that when you're calling and you're finding out all the participation, you find out that you're in network with Guardian, but you're paid through Aetna. So they're leasing you through Aetna. That means the Aetna fee schedule is the fee schedule you paid on for Aetna and Guardian patients. So if you want Guardian patients and you want to negotiate the fee schedule that the Guardian patients are paid on, who should you negotiate with? Aetna, right? Aetna is the company you would negotiate with because that's the fee schedule that's being paid on for Aetna and Guardian patients. If you reach out to Guardian first, and we don't even need, again, it doesn't matter which company we're talking about, but if you reach out to this company first, what they'll respond back with is probably a proposal, which is to say, we don't have you in network. Here's what we'd be willing to pay you. And unless you're paying attention to that, then you might accidentally join and go direct with an insurance company without knowing it, right? Maybe you'll accidentally accept a fee schedule increase and credential and change the way you participate, which could have positive or negative ramifications. But ultimately, that's something unintentional. So ultimately, that's why you need to pay attention and contact the correct company first. We want to contact the company that we're being paid through right now. Doesn't mean that we won't ever go to this company. That's what optimization is, and we'll talk about it later on. But the company that you're being paid on, the main payer, is the company you would reach out to first, okay? Now, let's say that you get in contact with the right person, you say the right things, and they come back to you and they say, sure, here's an offer. This is what we're paying you now. Here's what we'd be happy to pay you if you take this offer. Now, if they respond to you with that, everybody's going to be pretty excited, but then now you need to ask the question, how do I know this is competitive? How do I know this is going to actually make me more and increase my reimbursement rates? So again, there's some things that you can do to ensure or to stack the cards in your favor for those questions. So first things first, using the previous steps we talked about, figure out what your top 20 to 30 or 40 procedure codes are that have the highest quantity in production and revenue. Plug those into a spreadsheet, put in your UCRs, and put in the next column, what am I being paid for those procedures right now? Because again, in the previous steps, we collected our current fee schedule. And then in the fourth column, what are they going to pay me on this new offer? And then I'm doing the math, right? Are these all going up? Are some of them going up and some of them are going down? And then how frequently do I do these procedures? Because overall, you start paying attention to both frequency and is it going up or is it going down? Because some offers, they might increase your pro fee and decrease your crown, or increase your crown and decrease your pro fee, or increase panos and decrease this, all in four. So again, at the end of the day, a $100 procedure increase might be outweighed by a $5 procedure decrease, depending on how frequently you do those. So that's why this frequency matters. And looking at your procedure codes, you're not getting super excited by saying, oh, look, my crown went up by X amount of dollars, and not paying attention to pro fees. Because again, oftentimes we do a lot more pro fees than we do crowns. So at the end of the day, we need to look at that and do the math, okay? See if it's an overall increase or decrease for the practice. Let's say that you looked at that. Some other key things to look at would be to say, how does this offer compare to my other fee schedules, right? From other companies. Is this in my top 10% across all of my PPOs? Okay, that's good, right? It's better than most. Is it an overall increase? How does it compare in terms of a percentage of my UCR, right? Look at all those variables. Those are the things you can stack in your favor to say, am I comparing and looking at the right things? Ultimately, though, if you accept a fee schedule increase, there's some things you got to understand. After you say, sure, I'll take that increase, and you sign it and send it back to an insurance company, just because you've done that doesn't mean that it happened, that it actually went into effect. So the only way that this actually worked, and that a fee schedule actually increased, is the proof is in the pudding. And the pudding is the EOB in dentistry, right? Which is the claim that actually comes back from the insurance company, the explanation of benefits. Was I paid according to that new reimbursement rate that they negotiated? If so, great, it went into effect. If I wasn't, if I were you, I'd take that EOB and I'd take that email thread where I agreed to the new fee schedule, and I'd take that back to provider relations and say, what's going on here? Why didn't I get paid according to the new fee schedule? And so either A, it didn't work, they just didn't process it, or B, you're not effective. Because typically when you accept a new fee schedule offer, it can take 30 to 90 days to go into effect. And once that happens, they should be able to provide you with an effective date. So if it goes into effect as of August 1st, that means that every patient with a service date of August 1st and beyond for that insurance company should get paid according to that reimbursement rate. So look at those things to make sure that it actually happened. All right, that's number 2. Top PPO negotiation tactics. Now we're talking about number 3. So again, ultimately, if you're on the call today, you're trying to accomplish one thing, which is I want to know that my fee schedules are competitive. And then I realize that in order to know that they're competitive, I need to try to get them to go up, right? Same thing applies to salaries. If I want to know that I'm being paid competitively as an employee, I typically have to negotiate a higher salary. That's how I ensure that I'm getting more towards a competitive rate, okay? The third thing is, in addition to negotiating, what are my other strategies that I can use to maximize my negotiation opportunities and increase my fee schedule? Yeah, this is the last time. If you haven't downloaded it yet, go to ppguide.com. You can download the workbook with everything we've talked about, or scan that QR code. All right, 3 keys to this maximization concept. Number 1, how do you ensure your PPO fees are competitive? So we're going to dive into how do you know that your fee schedules are competitive, not only against your peers, but across the country. How do I know that I'm being paid competitively, right, and reimbursed competitively? Number 2, what is optimization? We've been talking about that all along. How do I minimize those risks and maximize the benefits of optimization? And then the third thing is, how do I calculate my return on investment from negotiating, right? If I'm going to negotiate and take all this effort to increase my fee schedules as a practice, what is my potential? How do I know if it's worth my effort and time? Okay, so let's dive into those 3 things. Okay, if you want to truly ensure that your PPO offers are competitive for your area, you have to understand these 5 things, bar none, okay? First thing is, you don't want to get locked into a low fee schedule. That's what you're probably worried about, right? Is if I'm going to negotiate and I get an offer back, I might look at that fee schedule offer against what I'm paid now, and maybe it's a big percentage difference, but how do I know that that's actually competitive, right? What if I could actually get way more than that? Or just looking at that compared to my other PPOs still doesn't tell me, is this competitive for my area? Is this competitive for the country? Is this competitive for my zip code? How do I know that's the case? Because problem with negotiations is typically when you accept an offer, you're locked in to that reimbursement rate for at least 2 years. And when I say locked in, what I don't mean is, it doesn't mean you can never terminate and drop and go out of network. What I mean is they won't renegotiate with you for probably 2 years. So if that's the case, now you know the negotiation and the acceptance of the offer matters, and it will matter for a long time. We talk to clients all the time that have been on the same fee schedule for more than 10 years, right? We're not talking 2 years, we're talking a decade. So again, the reimbursement rate that I get paid as a dentist and what I agree to matters quite a bit. So what Unitas brings to the table to help ensure and assure you that your fee schedules are competitive is we work with thousands of practices across the country today, and we've worked with thousands of practices across the country for the last decade. So we have data to help compare offers that we receive to see if they're competitive, right? So what that allows us to do is to say, because we've worked with thousands of practices in a given area, we know on average what is an average reimbursement in that area. And so when we get an offer back from the insurance company, we can compare it to that baseline and know if we should continue to push for more. Now, the key here to understand is because we work on your behalf, and because we work with insurance companies, one of the things that we also agree to not do with your own fee schedules or your competitors is we will never come to the table and be like, all right, Dr. Smith, here's your fee schedule offer from Cigna or from this insurance company, and here's what Dr. Joe is paid down the street. That's something we'll never do. One, because that's dishonest. And number two, we have signed NDAs with you and with insurance companies that preclude us from doing something like that. But what we do is because we have the data and we represent multiple locations, we know what the baseline is. The insurance company knows that we know what the baseline is. So we know how far we can push until we get above the average, right? That allows us to negotiate on your behalf to get you to competitive reimbursement. Additionally, we have high-level dedicated insurance contacts at most of these insurance companies that most practices don't have access to. So if you attempt to negotiate on your own, who are you reaching out to? Maybe it's the person that contacted you to get you to join the insurance company to credential 5 years ago. Maybe it's somebody you've called when you've had claim problems, somebody at Provider Relations, or maybe you have no contact. Because this is all we do, and because not only do we negotiate for thousands of practices a year, but we help credential and help thousands of doctors join insurance every year, we have high-level contacts at most every insurance company who know who we are, they know how many clients we represent, and we come to the table with not just, hey, we have all these doctors that want higher fees. We come to the table with benefits to the insurance company. We help credential thousands of doctors with insurance every year. That's valuable to insurance companies. They need doctors to join. And so because we can come to the negotiation table with a carrot, it gives us leverage that most practices cannot compete with because we have thousands and thousands of clients, okay? Additionally, not only do we negotiate on your behalf, we've done it for thousands of clients, and we have a highly trained team with years of experience. We have management structure where we have multiple layers of people working on your account, and we have a proven track record where we keep track of our success. So ultimately, if you want to ensure that your PPO offers are competitive for your area, you have to work with somebody that knows what a competitive offer looks like. Because ultimately, in dentistry, there is no website out there or legal ability for you to know what a competitive reimbursement rate looks like. And additionally, even if there was, and even if you did know what an average looked like, because you don't have the leverage and you're just one location or 2 or 5 or 50, but because we have thousands of clients, we have the leverage that allows us to negotiate a competitive fee schedule on your behalf, okay? Second thing, we talked about optimization. Negotiating your fee schedule, going to an insurance company and trying to increase the fee schedule is what we call negotiations. That's only one strategy to get you onto a higher fee schedule. And if ultimately your goal is to not just be competitive for your area, but to be paid on the higher end for your area, then you need to employ all available strategies, and negotiation's only one. A lot of times the most profitable and highest paying opportunities are accessible through what we call optimization. And optimization, again, is not a word we invented. Everybody uses it in different senses. But what we refer to when we're talking about participation optimization or PPO optimization, however you want to call it, what we're talking about is taking advantage of the fact that there are multiple ways that you can participate with an insurance company. So based on your current participation, Unitas identifies other arrangements, other paths to participation to be in network with the same insurance that might be more profitable than what you're on now. Many PPOs have multiple paths. That's the key to understand. And we have helped thousands of practices to take advantage of those paths. So we know how to shift from a direct contract to being leased, or from being leased to a direct contract, or from being leased to an umbrella network, right? Or from one umbrella to the other. Knowing how to make those shifts, knowing what paperwork to complete, who to contact, when it should happen, the risks and the benefits, and how long it takes, that's what we do. We don't just negotiate. We don't just come to the table with the leverage to get the current offer that's at place up. We understand the whole web of dentistry, and we understand that Cigna and Aetna and Guardian and Dentamax and Connection, and all of them have multiple relationships with each other. And so there's ways to take advantage of those relationships in your favor, so that way you get paid on a better reimbursement rate, okay? So the key to understand here is going back to this initial example we talked about. What if this green insurance company is leasing you through the orange. What that means is for those green patients, you're being reimbursed according to the orange insurance company's fee schedule. So let's just say this is Guardian and Aetna. Guardian's leasing from Aetna. And so for both patient bases, you're paid according to Aetna's fee schedule. How do we optimize something like that? You'd go to Aetna first and attempt to negotiate that fee schedule. Then you would go to Guardian or the green insurance company, ask for a proposal from them to see what they're willing to pay if you switch to a direct contract, and then help you weigh the pros and the cons of being direct versus being leased, because there's still pros and cons. Might not cover all the patients, might determine the delay time of how you're paid, to help you weigh those pros and cons. But we'll also look at other options, right? Guardian leases not just from Aetna, they could lease from all these other companies. What about Carrington and Connection and Dynamax and Sun Life and Principal and United Concordia? What about all those other insurance companies that apply to that specific PPO, right? And again, ignore the names we're using, but understand the concept. What we mean when we talk about optimization is thinking about that web that we showed earlier on. How do we snip away those options so that way when you're paid for an insurance company, you're paid on the best of the 8 available relationships that exist for that PPO, right? We don't necessarily want to be paid and have the PPOs have the ability to pick any of those 8 different options, 8 different fee schedules, 8 different partners. We only want them to pay us on the highest available option. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to optimization. Now, what I will emphasize is that negotiations practices, it's pretty logical on how you would do that. I think we've made the argument as to how somebody like Unitas can do that at a better and higher level. But when it comes to optimization, this is something that I generally do not recommend practices try on their own, because there's so many moving parts within the state, within the PPO, that if you're optimizing without doing it every day, more often than not, what we see is we have practices coming to us that are attempting optimization, and they've shifted their fee schedule, not to a better one, they've dropped to something even worse. Or all of a sudden, they're now out of network with the PPO they've been in network with. They have a ton of patients coming to their door, and they're out of network. So again, optimization isn't without its risks. It's certainly even more risky if you're doing it without being an expert in optimization. So that's why I encourage most practices to say, if you want to optimize and maximize your fee schedules, you need to work with Unitas, who are the experts in optimization. Okay, the third question that we talked about, or the principle, was, if I'm going to take all the effort, if my staff's going to do this, right, or if I'm going to do this as a staff member, or dentist, or office manager, how do I know what my return on investment would be to negotiate on my own? The answer is, I have no idea what that return on investment would be. The only thing that we can project for Unitas is the results that we've gotten accomplished, because we control the variables in that scenario. I don't know how many times you're going to call. I don't know who you're going to talk to. I don't know what fee schedule you're on now. But when we're talking about projecting return on investment for the clients we work with, there's more variables that we're at least aware of and in control, which is why we're able to provide a projected return on investment for the clients that we work with. So a couple of things. Over 10 years, like I said, we've implemented this plan and framework for thousands of dentists across the country, and we've helped pioneer this form of representation to negotiate and optimize. And we can project the return on investment through our average results. Again, they're projections and they're estimates, but they're based off of our historical data. So how we do that is we normally look at 3 numbers that matter. Your production, what percentage of that production comes from PPOs that can end up being improved, and then what average increase is achieved. So let's look at simple numbers. The average one location, one doctor practice is typically doing over $1 million in production. Again, that's a gross guesstimation and over a generalization, but again, it makes the numbers easy to calculate. Let's say half of that total production comes from PPOs that end up improving the reimbursement rate. So you cut out cash paying patients, Medicaid, Medicare, fee-for-service, other insurance companies that don't negotiate with you. Let's just say only half of your patient base comes from PPOs that can be improved. For us, our average increase for a practice we work with is 10% across the fee schedules that we improve. So in that scenario, $1 million of production, only $500,000 of it is touchable through our efforts. At a 10% increase, that's $50,000. Okay. Below average is around a 4% increase, and above average is around an 18% increase. And again, all of this fluctuates based on those 3 numbers. What average increase is achieved, what percentage of that total production comes from negotiable insurances, and then what is your total production. So again, if you do $10 million a year, different calculation here, right? 10 million, let's say it's half of that, 10% increase. That's a lot more than $1 million in production, okay? And vice versa. That's how you calculate if we were to do it for you. So here's some case studies. We recently worked with Dr. Morgan in North Carolina, 5 negotiations and 2 optimizations. It resulted in $64,000 in projected revenue increase Dr. Baker in Texas, 5 PPOs negotiated, 3 optimizations, over $79,000. Dr. Young in Florida, 7 PPOs, 4 optimizations, over $100,000. Again, these are projections. These are based off of actual percentage increases we were able to achieve and the production that they do on an annual basis. So ultimately, like you can see, the point is that this is possible. It's done every day, and the framework just needs to be followed. And it's more than possible for practices nationwide. So in summary, we've gone through a lot of information today, but just wanted to summarize this and kind of tie it off with a nice bow, which is if you want to make sure your fee schedules are competitive for your area and you want to increase your fee schedules, you have to follow the framework of what works. And we've been doing this for 10 years, and this is the framework I would suggest. Number one, if I'm a doctor or an office manager or insurance coordinator, I have to understand how each of my doctors participates and what my current reimbursement rates are. I have to know how to tactfully approach the negotiation process. And then third, I need to understand what my options are to maximize. So I can partner with PPO experts like Unitas to evaluate additional opportunities, negotiate for me, optimize for me, and project my return on investment. Okay, I lied. This is it. I gave you one more option. Here's the QR code, ppoguide.com. I forgot this was in here, but again, you can scan that. If you haven't done it yet, please do. Okay, here is my final offer to you guys, and then we'll pivot to Q&A. I appreciate everybody being on the call today, but what I know is going to happen, because it's the tail end of your day, if you're in New York, it's almost 7 o'clock. If you're in California, it's still almost 4 o'clock, and you've been listening to me for an hour, so you're probably already half awake anyways. But this is my offer to you guys, because the minute we hop off the webinar, you're going to go back to doing something else, whether that's dentistry or going home, right? So if you're willing to hop on a free consultation with our team, a couple of things will happen, and we'll be able to give you these bonuses. Number one, what we'll do is on a consultation in typically 30 minutes or less, we'll hop on the phone with one of our experts. They'll evaluate your existing PPOs, what you've done, where you're located, and if we're a good fit for you. And then they'll provide you an ROI projection of, can we work with you? Does it make sense to work with you? We turn away plenty of clients that it doesn't make sense to work with. This is why we call it consultation. We'll consult and talk it through what your options are, okay? If you complete one of those consultations with us, all you have to do is go to ppoguide.com, download that QR code we've been talking about. After you download it, there'll be a button that says schedule a consult, book it through there. Or again, if none of this is working, you can always just go to our regular website. It's pposolutions.com. Go book a call with us. But if you book a call and complete the consultation, we'll send you these 4 bonuses to help enhance your experience. Number one is our e-guide, ebook, whatever you want to call it, of 35 of the most common insurance problems. Easily $199 value. What this is, it's a compilation of the most common questions we get from our clients. And because we get a bunch of those questions and we're not the experts on the answers, we go figure out what the answer is, create a document so that way we can answer it for our clients. And so a lot of times we'll go find the experts in the industry that know the answer, and then we'll provide that back. So things like balance billing, down coding, adding an associate, changing a tax ID number, anything that would come up in regards of the realm of insurance, any question that you've asked yourself or your staff in the last 12 months, I guarantee you one of those things is in this ebook. So again, 35 of the most common PPO related questions and answers, that ebook will be given to you. Second thing is what we talked about earlier on. If you want to collect your own participation, or if you call insurance, which you probably do because you're a dental practice, if you want the PPO provider relations master contact list of all the phone numbers of all the Blue Crosses and Deltas and Aetnas and Cignas and Guardians and Connections, and you hate going on Google and dialing the wrong number and clicking the wrong extension, you can get that free provider relations contact list that we use every day. $299 value easily. We don't give it to anybody else. You can get it if you complete this consult. Third thing is something I've built for you. The tool that we use for our own clients to help evaluate their UCRs versus their reimbursement rates to make sure that they're all above where they should be, and to help rank what is their highest paying fee schedule versus their lowest paying fee schedule. That exact template that we use that I helped build for Unitas, that we use for our clients, I've cloned it, put it into Google Sheets, and you can get a copy of that as well. Again, that's something we don't even get to clients. So again, if you wanted to be able to figure out, are my UCRs above all of my PPO fee schedules and have all the formulas already ready and plug and play, you don't have to figure out how those formulas work and how to rank those and figure out which one's the highest paying. That fee schedule, that Google Sheet template is ready for you. Last thing is you get a $250 discount off of our PPO management service just by attending this webinar. Again, not trying to be a Bob Barker here, but all of that and more is your offer today. I appreciate everybody being on the call today. We want to make this as tantalizing as possible because we'd love to have the opportunity to chat with you or your team because I feel so confident that we'd be able to talk, you can have a good conversation. We're willing to give you these bonuses. And again, we might not be able to work with you at all, but what's in it for you is you'll get a free PPO evaluation and ROI projection for us to see if it makes sense to work together. And if you sat on the call with me this long, you obviously need higher fees. And at the end of the day, we can help you do that. So we'd love for you to hop on a call with us. So scan that QR code or go to that website, and we will schedule that call. And once you've completed it, we'll send you these bonuses. All right. That's the last of my Barb Barker pitch to you guys at the end. Now let's pivot to FAQs. If anybody has questions, Shirley, if we can dive through those.
Yeah.
I think we see about 4 in here. And then if we don't have any more, we have some of the most popular ones here, so I can dive into those as well if we need to.
That's great. And thank you so much, Philip. That was so informative. And yeah, we have some questions already, so that's great. Starting with Dr. Chase Elliott, what does umbrella networking mean?
Okay, so that came on early on in the presentation, which I might have explained at that point further on, but I'm happy to rehash this for you. So the umbrella networking, or an umbrella network, is typically what people confuse as a different kind of insurance company. So umbrella networks are also called third-party administrators. So the most popular ones are ones you've probably heard of, but you would never really see a card-carrying patient. So if you've ever heard your staff say Dentamax or Connection or GEHA, GEHA, or Carrington, Premier Dental Group, Zealous, a lot of these are popular umbrella companies. More often than not, they don't have card-carrying patients. They're just an intermediary between you and multiple insurance companies in a way for you to participate with those insurances. So hopefully that answers your question.
And it looks like there was another question that came in about umbrella networks. This one from Dr. Nina Patel. So if you are after with umbrella and not toppled, are you considered in network with PPO?
I think, Dr. Patel, what you might be asking is, if you're in network with an umbrella, are you in network with the PPO? So odds are more often than not, yes, because most umbrella companies don't have card carrying patients. Typically, if you've credentialed with somebody like Dentamax or Carrington or Connection, they immediately turn around and shoot your information out to everybody in their network. So if you've even credentialed with just one of those companies, odds are there's at least one other PPO that's accessing you through that umbrella. Odds are probably multiple. Okay.
Thank you, Philip. This one from a Zoom user, anonymous. If we drop the insurance plan directly contracted with my doctor, which is also leased out to other insurance providers, will my doctor become out of network for both the directly contracted plan and the ones that it's leased out?
That's a great question, because that proves that you're understanding how this relationship works. So the answer is maybe, right? So what they're asking is, let's say I'm in network with Aetna and I have 3 PPOs leasing me through Aetna, and I go out of network with Aetna. Will I now be out of network with all those people that were borrowing me through Aetna? The answer is maybe, but odds are probably not. And the reason why is because those 3 companies don't just lease from Aetna. More often than not, they lease from everybody else. And so because they've created these active partnerships, what they'll do is the minute, so that let's say you term a contract here, you now send a claim in, right, to this insurance company, they pull you up and they go, he's not in network through Aetna anymore, or, oh, she's not in network through Aetna anymore. What are they in network with? If they've gotten communication from other insurance companies that you're in network with Sun Life or Guardian or Cigna, and they have an existing relationship, they'll just sign the paperwork, boom, process the claim, now you're in network. Okay, so it's typically very difficult to intentionally go out of network with the PPOs in this equation just by just by dropping this PPO, because they have so many existing relationships. They'll find somewhere else to access you. Now, if your intention is to truly go out of network, that's why you have to understand all these existing relationships, so that way you're truly severing all available options. But if you're really I just wanted to drop this one payer, will that negatively affect me? The only answer to that question to know that is for you to gather all of your participation and to know all the existing other potential relationships these carriers have, and if you're in network with them. And even then still, it's up to that insurance company to decide how quickly, or if at all, they're going to try to access you through somebody else. So if you're trying to optimize an equation, you're trying to intentionally optimize, that's why you'd work with somebody like Unitas, because we can make sure that the destination for the new carrier is in place before you drop that contract, so that way you land on a secure destination and you don't sit out of network. If that makes sense.
And this other one, also anonymous, how can I find out which insurance companies are under the same umbrella? I've been attempting to reach them. but haven't received any responses.
So it's a lot of it's difficult probably because what you're doing is you're going to the PPO and saying, what umbrella are you accessing me through, or who do you currently lease from? Which a lot of times they either don't have the answer to that, because you're looking like this, right? PPO is under potentially Dynamax. You're asking like Cigna, are you under Dynamax for me, or are you under Dynamax and sometimes under Connection? And just in general, do you have existing relationships? Sometimes it's hard for this carrier to know which relationships they access from, but it's very easy for this person to know who falls underneath a network. And I know maybe that doesn't make sense, but odds are you're probably asking this carrier, like Cigna, hey, who are you accessing me through, or who do you oftentimes access people through? And that's going to be a difficult question for them to answer, either because the person you're talking to just doesn't know or have access to that information, or it just depends. And so typically the best thing to do is, if you're trying to figure out what is the payer list, or so for each umbrella company, who do they actively have relationships with just in general, either in your state or in general, you would ask that umbrella company, can I have a copy of your existing payer list, right? So sometimes they're willing to publish that and say, here are all the PPOs that we access either in your area or just across the country. So that would help kind of fill in the gap. If you're trying to figure out who talks to who, you would ask these carriers. But again, oftentimes if you're asking that, typically because you're wanting to figure out either how do I go in network under the best reimbursement, or how do I go out of network and not get picked up? So in either of those scenarios, what we're really describing is optimization. So you want to at least hop on a call with us and we can talk you through what your options are. Okay.
Wow,
I think that's great. I don't know if we need to go over these other ones, but I'm happy to. If anybody has any questions like these, feel free to send an email to this email, pposolutions@unitasdental.com. If you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer those, or schedule a call with us. We can talk to you about those then. I think we're good.
Very cool. Okay, very cool. And did you want to say anything about this slide again, or?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Just a reminder to everybody, go to ppguide.com and take that workbook, and then feel free to book a call with us. We'd love to chat with you.
Wow.
Hand the mic back over to you. Thanks, Shirley.
Thank you. Thank you for the handoff. Thank you, Philip. That was awesome. So informative, so many opportunities. And I think, thank you for reminding us all of what they were and how to get in touch with you and how to take next steps. That was a wonderful presentation. And again, we did record tonight's webinar, and we're going to be emailing it out sometime in the next week. So thank you all again for joining us. We would appreciate your feedback via a survey that's going to pop up on your screens shortly. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Shirley.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.